Before we begin, I would like to put out a small disclaimer and warning. The Lunduke Journal prides itself on being very family friendly. The topics that we cover, even when they are more adult topics, we try to keep things very G or PG rated. We try to make sure that should small children be in the room when you are listening to or watching episodes of the Lunduke Journal, you don't have to quickly turn it off because we'll say a lot of colorful words or put inappropriate for children imagery on the screen, that sort of thing. Today's episode deals with a topic that is, in my opinion, inappropriate to be discussed in front of small children. This episode will maintain its very G and PG level of rating. However, I recommend that there not be young children around, simply because they are going to have questions about what a lot of this means, and I don't want to put anyone in a difficult position of having to answer those questions for children who are just simply not old enough to hear about them. So specifically, we're going to be talking about child pornography, only because it directly relates to some very significant news within the open source and free software world, and there simply is no way to cover this particular bit of news and what is happening within significant portions of the open source world without at least mentioning it. You will not have to worry about averting your eyes. There will be no disturbing images on the screen, but some of the facts that you will hear will be disturbing because they are disturbing. All right, here we go. Let's go back about 2 weeks. The Stallman report, stallman-report.org, was a rather lengthy document published at that website, specifically targeting Richard Stallman. It was a hit piece, and it was an anonymous hit piece. We covered it here at the Lunduke Journal. Look at, if those of you watching the video version, look at that handsome devil in a very nice stylish shirt. But it was a very, very opinionated, very political document that was seeking to harm Richard Stallman and remain anonymous while doing so. The authors wished to remain anonymous. I want to read a small little snippet, a very, very small snippet of the Stallman report to you, so you can see what the core argument against Richard Stallman they were making was. And in order to make that statement, they actually just quote Richard Stallman. And on his website, Richard Stallman posted the following. And again, none of these topics are terribly fun, so you'll just have to bear with me. It's about pedophilia. All right. So, quote, again, this is on Richard Stallman's website, and this was there for quite some time. Dutch pedophiles have formed a political party to campaign for legalization. I, Richard Stallman, am skeptical of the claim that voluntary pedophilia harms children. The argument that it causes harm seems to be based on cases which aren't voluntary, which are then stretched by parents who are horrified by the idea that their little baby is maturing. Many years after posting this note, I had conversations with people who had been sexually abused as children and had suffered harmful effects. These conversations eventually convinced me that the practice is harmful and adults should not do it. Okay, so Richard Stallman has a long history of playing devil's advocate for a variety of different laws, sometimes very gross laws, including pedophilia and bestiality. I have on many occasions discussed these particular positions, these arguments that Stallman has put out. I've discussed them with Richard, to his face, one-on-one, mano-a-mano, and he knows that I strongly disagree with many of his stances. However, you'll note that as Richard learned, he decided, you know what, yeah, pedophilia is wrong, and he updated his opinion from a legal argumentative perspective and posted that online. Just the same, the Stallman report primarily focused on the fact that at one point, Richard did say that he was skeptical that voluntary pedophilia harmed children. Okay. That was their primary thrust, right? There was a lot of other things about him being awkward and failing to pick up women when he tried to pick up women, and women kind of laughed at him, and then they used that as a means, as a reason to suggest very strongly that I'm going to scroll down here to the bottom of this, that they, being the Free Software Foundation and the GNU Project, need to oust Richard Stallman, ban, and shun anyone who's ever spoken to Richard Stallman or interviewed Richard Stallman, which would include this show, because he's been a guest of mine several times over the years, as well as many other magazines and YouTubers and podcasts and whatnot. And conferences, and in what seemed to be a very overtly power grabby sort of a situation, where the author of the Stallman report felt like those people need to be tossed out, and new people who don't like Richard Stallman should be installed in the place. I suggested there could be some serious ulterior motives to this. It really seemed obvious to me that there were, and so I did a bit of digging and eventually figured out, my gosh, there's if you're seeing on the screen right now, there's yet another handsome devil in an amazing, the same shirt. I'm wearing the same shirt as I did when I covered this, I figured out that it was, in fact, a gentleman by the name of Drew DeVault who wrote StallmanReport.org. Figured out a large number of mechanisms. To start with, the original Stallman Report website was originally... when it was registered, its DNS was pointing at the same IP address as Drew DeVault's own personal website, drewdevault.com. There was a lot of other reasons along with that. When I sent an email to both Drew DeVault's personal email address, which you can see on the screen right now, as well as the anonymous email address at stallman-report.org, I got a response within minutes of each other, that where the Stallman report author was like, the report authors are going to remain entirely anonymous. And then Drew DeVault responded to me with a sort of a coy, hey, if I admit that I wrote it, will you give me some money, or something like that. It was a very strange response. I then looked in the headers of both of those emails and realized they came from the same place. Drew DeVault uses an email service provider over in Europe. He's in the Netherlands, and that I'd never heard of. So kind of a small email service provider, and he has it using that service provider for both the Stallman Report email address and his Drew DeVault email address. It came from the same place. Like the headers matched up. It was like, oh, yep, that definitely is him. So it became very, very increasingly clear that it was, in fact, this Drew DeVault character. Now, Drew DeVault has had many issues where he has attacked people regularly. In fact, if you go to his website, he's attacked Richard Stallman for years now. I mean, attacking Richard Stallman's been a common thing, but he also attacks the creator of Hyperland and a bunch of other projects. He likes to go on an outward assault, and he tends to use very extreme leftist wording and whatnot when he goes on his attacks, because Drew DeVault, according to his Mastodon social media profile, he is himself a very extreme leftist, right? So here we have an issue where we now know that this specific person, Drew DeVault, was certainly attacking Richard Stallman because of Richard Stallman's view around children and sexuality, which Richard Stallman has changed over the years, right? Well, now a new report appears. It's called DMPWN.info. DMPWN.info. They call this the DeVault report, and DMPWN being one of the usernames of Drew DeVault, it appears. Now, I'm not going to read all of this to you, but DMPWN.info is where you can go if you want to read all of the details. If you do decide to read all the details to start with, I would like to say thank you to the authors of this individual website, of this report. I think using the term report for all of these is strange. They're articles, but okay. I want to say thank you to them for not including by default the pictures that were posted supposedly by Drew DeVault or commented on or translated by Drew DeVault because they are illegal and inappropriate and just downright awful. I also want to say a few other statements before we proceed. This report came out 6 days ago. I immediately reached out to Drew DeVault directly, again, via both his Stallman Report email address and his drewdevault.com email address, his personal email address, both of which he had responded to me in the past. Because, and in fact, I reached out to him on this topic before these articles came out, because people were starting to have rumblings around these topics. And I asked Drew DeVault point blank if there was any truth to the allegations that were appearing that he had been in some way involved with essentially child pornography. And he did not respond. I asked him multiple times if he would like to comment, if he would like to deny it, if he would like to issue a justification for it on legal basis, whatever he wanted to say. And I made it very clear to him that I would not edit anything he says. I would publish his statements in full. He declined. He did not respond. So I did some as much digging as I was comfortable with, because this topic is disgusting and I just don't want my brain full of this garbage. But I did enough digging around the sort of OPSEC side of things where I really looked into the operational security side of things, where I really looked into, is this in fact Drew DeVault? Now, I'm going to say flat out that these allegations against him are incredibly serious from both a moral perspective and a legal perspective. Drew DeVault is a resident of the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, the things that Drew DeVault, some of the things that Drew DeVault are accused of in here are extremely serious crimes. Just like they're extremely serious crimes here in the United States. Because these crimes are so serious, I want to be extremely careful. I want to urge everyone caution here, because the authorities should be looking into this. If Drew DeVault himself wants to deny this, I think he should. If he thinks there's any error in here, he should deny this. I can find no fault in this report. It looks accurate to me. From what I've looked into it, for his user account names and the IP addresses and the dates, everything all matches up. This all does appear to be Drew DeVault. It would very much surprise me if it were not. Just the same, because these crimes are so serious and so severe and so deeply disturbing, I want to urge everyone caution as we go through this, because innocent until proven guilty, right? And at this point, I would say a 99% certainty. But I want to urge everyone caution. Again, Drew, if you want to dispute this, reach out to me and I will publish your statement in full. Because these are extremely serious. And the reason we're going to go through a little bit of it now is, if these are true allegations, and it looks like they are, that calls into serious question the motivations of Drew DeVault for attacking Richard Stallman, because essentially he is attacking Richard Stallman for arguing in a devil's advocate way regarding pedophilia, when Drew DeVault is literally collecting and distributing child pornography, right? So Drew DeVault would be doing something far more severe, extraordinarily more severe than Richard Stallman having an intellectual discussion from a hypothetical devil's advocate point of view regarding legalities, right? And Drew DeVault is actually participating in the distribution of child pornography, if these are true. And it seems like they are. And we've given Drew many opportunities. That's why I haven't published this story till now, because I wanted to give Drew copious amounts of time to respond to this. And as I've seen him online, posting about all manner of different things, I know he's around. I know he normally he monitors and responds to multiple email addresses, which I've communicated with him in the past, and he simply is not responding. So we're going to talk about this. It's also interesting from the point of view of this being a continuing pattern of attack from leftists, extremists on tech organizations. An extremist on the left side of the political spectrum, what they will do, and this is over and over again, is take something that they themselves do or they themselves are and accuse their opponent, right? Someone they want to harm, let's say the leader of an open source project or the founder of a foundation, and they will attack that person for doing the same thing that they do. And this is an ongoing over and over again pattern. It's a whole lot of chutzpah, if you ask me, but it's worth noting that it's happening. And so that's one of the reasons why we're going to discuss this a little bit today. All right, we're looking at dmpwn.info right now. They put a warning up top. However, I want to call out that they did a nice job. As you scroll down here, anytime they come across issues where they're like, hey, there's something that's inappropriate here, they hide it and double censor it, but then they do provide links and ways that you can look into it yourself. I'm going to read just a few snippets of it from you here. This is from dmpwn.info. Quote, Drew DeVault has an odd and frankly disturbing fascination with viewing and distributing explicit depictions of prepubescent girls doing sexual acts. This isn't just a one-off event or something that has happened by accident, but a long and storied history of such behavior that spans over a decade. And they give a brief history of Drew DeVault. Quote, DeVault is best known for his contributions to Wayland and the Sway window manager. He's the owner of SourceHut, a GitHub alternative. Then they go into talk about how he kind of butts heads with a lot of open source people, specifically centrists and right-leaning open source people. And then that he is the author of the Stallman report. Okay. Now, I want to actually give them additional credit here because they dug into Drew's authorship of the Stallman report even further than I did. And they found a draft. They literally found a draft of the Stallman report on drewdevault.com. It was literally RMS draft and then a number .drewdevault.com, a subdomain of drewdevault.com, his personal website, which was captured on September 29th, 2024 by the Internet Archive, which was 2 weeks before Stallman report was launched. Drew DeVault had on his own server a draft of the report. And then when he created the report, he registered it and pointed it to his own IP address. And then the email addresses for both the Stallman report and Drew DeVault are both hosted by the same peculiar email company that I've never heard of, I've never even seen before. Yeah, it's him, right? It's definitely Drew DeVault that wrote the Stallman report. So that being solidified ever further is awfully nice. Now, they cover a lot of individual things relating to Drew DeVault, his online user account names, why his various user account names are confirmed to be him. I would recommend people go and read it for themselves. I'm not going to go through all of those details here because it's not critically important to the story. However, it is a difficult to refute thing. What the user accounts that are being discussed here do appear with a high level of certainty to be Drew DeVault. And again, if Drew DeVault would like to object to this, to disagree with this, to provide any sort of evidence that this is not him, or just simply to say it's not him, please do so. He has not, even though he's been given repeated opportunities to do so. He has come to the defense, Drew DeVault, repeatedly, of pedophiles. This is peculiar considering his attacks on Richard Stallman for discussing the legalities around pedophilia, just the legalities. Drew DeVault, on the other hand, repeatedly comes to the defense of pedophiles and goes even further than that. Quote, this is from one of Drew DeVault's posts. I pity pedophiles. You can't control what turns you on, and they happen to be turned on by something illegal. It's a dick move to try and bring it up and shame them publicly. Okay, or him publicly. I'm going to scroll down a little bit here because then he posts additional statements that call a lot of things into question. Quote, this is from Drew DeVault again, quote, Drew DeVault, I'm Drew DeVault of the opinion that 14-year-old girls should be required to have an IUD installed. 10 years of contraception that requires a visit to the doctor to remove prematurely. So Drew DeVault is actually advocating for little underage girls be forced to have permanent contraception, and that people shouldn't talk badly about pedophiles because it's a quote dick move to bring it up. Deeply disturbing, and I'm going to point out that is about 1,000 bazillion times more disturbing than what Richard Stallman said. So if that's the case, if these are really Drew DeVault's opinions, and they sure do appear to be, and he's attacking Richard Stallman for having far less extreme opinions on the same general topic area, that calls into serious question the motivation of Drew DeVault. Because if he really genuinely doesn't seem to disagree with Richard Stallman's stance here. In fact, he goes way further than Richard Stallman's stance to an extreme, crazy, depraved degree. So what was the motivation of the Stallman report? Now, I floated several ideas, one of which is simply a power grab, try and use anything they can in order to oust Richard Stallman from the GPL, from the GNU project, in large part because the GNU project owns the copyright over all GNU project code, including GCC, GNU Emacs, and many others. And the only reason that those pieces of code are only licensed under the GPL is because the head of the GNU project deems it so. Because the GNU project has the copyrights. They can change the license whenever they want going forward. Even dual license it. They can make it all proprietary going forward with future revisions if they want to, or kind of. And the reason that license change hasn't occurred is because Richard Stallman's at the helm. Well, if you kick out Richard Stallman and instill someone else through essentially a forced hostile takeover, you can change the licenses. You can do a lot of different things, and it can get potentially quite dramatic. So maybe that's one of the reasons. But whatever the reasons are, it has nothing to do with Richard Stallman's statements, because Drew DeVault has far more extreme statements on the same topics. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit here because it gets way worse. It goes far beyond having disturbing ideas. Drew DeVault apparently is the developer of a bot that runs on Reddit, that scours Reddit, specifically Reddit subreddits that post child pornography in an anime style. And he scrolls through these essentially pedophilic and racist subreddits in order to find who the original author was to give them credit. Now, many of these posts, and they're all hard-coded into this little bot, this little script he wrote. These individual subreddits, right? So these are the ones that he wanted this bot to be working on, right? And many of these subreddits were something called lolly or lolicon, which I'm learning about from all of this. But I'm going to read the description of lolicon from the DeVault report here. quote, Lolicon is a genre of fictional media which focuses on young or young-looking girl characters, particularly in sexually suggestive or erotic manner. The term, a portmanteau of the English phrase Lolita complex, also refers to desire and affection for such characters and their fans. It's essentially it's child pornography art and animation, right? It's drawn child pornography. Now, here's the important thing with that. That's criminal. The dissemination and possession of child pornography deemed to be such, even when it is drawn, is a crime both in the United States and the Netherlands, where Drew DeVault lives. That's important to remember. So if this is true, and it appears to be, this is a very serious criminal matter. And then the report goes on to discuss at length why this is him that is doing these sorts of things. And then it goes on to even worse. It gets far, far worse. In 2020, a user by the name of DMPWN, which you'll note is a slight variation on the username that Drew DeVault uses everywhere, that being CMPWN. And they have evidence here that says that, yes, that is in fact Drew DeVault. Commented on an image of an anime girl on a website called Danburu, an image sharing board where users share often pornographic anime images. Okay. He talks about it in depth regarding that, and as well as he was translating text related to these anime images, tagging them. Gosh, I hate this topic so much. This account also translated images on Danburu, including a large number of sexually drawn children. Many of these images have tags that Drew DeVault added, such as kindergarten uniform, kindergartner. Drew DeVault was translating and tagging images and collecting images of sexually explicit drawn kindergartners. And no panties, nude, and nipples, and other words that I dislike that I am now saying in the Lunduke Journal. To make this all a little bit more confirmed, Drew DeVault hosts his desktop configuration files on SourceHut. So Drew DeVault runs this GitHub alternative known as SourceHut. On there, he was hosting his desktop configuration files. A quick look through his desktop configuration finds that in his Qt browser bookmarks, they found that Danburu website, right? Along with multiple Japanese translation resources that seem to be all related together. Quote, this is a quote from the report. While writing this report, as people had begun to put the puzzle pieces together, the Danburu account's username was changed from DMPWN to the least identifying one possible, user 410761, the user ID. This confirms with near 100% certainty that this is his account. He also deleted his bookmarks file, but they already cataloged all of that. Too late. Screenshots and Internet Archive and everything else. The internet never forgets, man. The internet never forgets. So the account is still active with its latest translation of child-centric pornography being in August of 2024, proving that he currently uses it. Not only that, but the user account on this Danburu account is a paid account. He pays for this, apparently, by having a platinum account there. Quote, the significance of this is that according to Danburu's wiki, Platinum members have the additional ability to view censored tags. This is important because the only censored tags on Danburu are of lolly stuff. So lolly, basically lolly and lolly involving boys. So child pornography of girls and boys are the only thing that are censored there, and you pay extra to see those. And Drew DeVault apparently paid extra to gain access to that content. This shows that his account is almost certainly used to intentionally view pedophilic images. However, we cannot see which ones without having a paid account. I do not have a paid account, and I like that the authors of this, as they're investigating this, they're like, no, we're not getting a paid account to do this. We're not doing this. We don't need this in our brain. We don't need to ever be involved in this. I'm with you guys on that. This is just, it's too gross. There's enough here that it doesn't. No further digging needs to be done by reporters or journalists or community members. This at this point is over to officers of the law, essentially. I mean, this is where this becomes a legal matter for Drew DeVault. Now, here's the thing. It's very clear from all of this that Drew DeVault's going to be in some trouble here. If this is not true, if any of this is not accurate, I highly suggest that Drew DeVault say so, because this is all now out there. He's not really done a very good job of covering his tracks, insofar as he's done some pretty awful and heinous things. And he's clearly wanted to stay anonymous. He wanted the Stallman report to be anonymous, but he did a bad job of making it anonymous. He clearly wanted his child pornography accounts to be anonymous, because he deleted it and started changing usernames as people started figuring it out, but he didn't do a very good job of it. All the pieces and parts are kind of easily tied together without very much effort. I should point out, this is not rocket science what is being done here. So he's clearly concerned about if people know these sorts of things, if people can tie his name to the things he's done, the things he's said, the things he's posted, the things he's translated, etc. But now it's out. And I would highly suggest, I don't know Drew DeVault personally, but I would suggest, if any of this is not true, to make a statement as such, because as far as we can tell, it is. That does seriously, all of this calls into very serious question the motivation for writing the Stallman report, where he is making recommendations like the Free Software Foundation needs to kick everyone out who even talked to Richard Stallman. If you looked at Richard Stallman once, you should go to jail. Like it's a very extreme declaration. Okay, he didn't say that, but he stopped just short of that. And it's very extreme. It's an obvious power grab. The motivations for which I think we can only speculate. I have some good ideas and I've voiced them here and elsewhere, but I think we can only speculate on the behind the scenes motivation. But clearly the motivation is not, oh my gosh, Richard Stallman said some things that are inappropriate, right? Because the individual who is yelling at Richard Stallman about saying inappropriate things does and says far more inappropriate things. In fact, so inappropriate that they are criminal. So clearly, Drew DeVault is not having a moral issue here with Richard Stallman. He if anything, he probably feels Richard Stallman probably wouldn't go far enough, right? So what is the motivation here? And why is this a recurring pattern? Not necessarily the gross, kiddie porn stuff, but the person on the left attacking someone within free software or open source, regardless of what the target's political affiliation is, but attacking them for something that the person on the left already does. Just to bring on a very simple, obvious example, I want to talk about NixOS. This was when was this happening? This was back in July of this year. NixOS committed what the people who did it called a purge, right? So the individuals, the extreme leftists within NixOS decided that there were people within the project, including the founder of the project, prominent long-term developers, and others, who were too centrist or right-leaning. And so they wanted to commit a purge of, quote, Nazis. Now, the interesting thing here is that those people who were committing the purge regularly accused those that were centrist or right-leaning of being fascists and Nazis, and talking about how awful they were as people. When the reality was, it was the extreme leftists who were committing that purge, who were the most fascistic of all. They were the ones who were acting in a fascist way. And I think it would be almost impossible for them to not have known that, right? So they were having a particular affinity for fascism, fascist tactics. They themselves were extreme leftists, like the Nazis, and they saw people who weren't like that, so they accused them of being fascists and Nazis as an attack. And it worked. NixOS banned and blocked all sorts of people and even forced the founder of the project itself out of the project, right? And this isn't the only example of this. You see this over and over again. Those of you who read and listen to and watch the Lunduke Journal, you've seen example after example, almost on a weekly basis, of exactly this sort of pattern. Extreme technology leftists, right? People in the computer industry, but on the extreme left, having something about them that is not so savory, let's just say, right? And they accuse whoever they're attacking of the thing that they themselves are doing. Oftentimes, the attack that they levy against someone else will be the exact that they're doing. They will say, "Stop being a fascist. You're not allowed to be here anymore unless you think like us." They literally use fascism to attack someone else who they call fascist. It's wild, and it kind of makes the brain melt down a little bit. It's crazy, and it's a recurring pattern over and over and over again. We've been seeing this for the last several years within the tech industry, and it's really ramped up over the last year, just to an intense degree. Literally, it's rare that a week goes by when an example of this doesn't rear its head, destroying one project or another. And the thing with this, with the Stallman report, is identical to what's happening here. It is another example of exactly that. Now, the details around it are more disgusting. They're more repulsive and horrific. They are more difficult to discuss because just simply saying some of the words of the things that Drew DeVault is accused of posting online make a person feel yucky just for having read the words or heard the words or said the words. And so it's difficult to discuss, but the pattern is essentially the same thing that we've seen over and over and over again. So where do we go from here? What we do in relation to Drew DeVault, I don't know. Obviously, I'm just going to back away. If Drew DeVault wants to issue a statement where he denies all of this, I will publish it in full, because I believe everyone deserves their chance to defend themselves. I believe in being innocent until proven guilty. And honestly, I hate to think that any human being would do or say the things that Drew DeVault is accused of here. The evidence that Drew DeVault did say and do these things is almost overwhelming. Like, it's a lot. It's not tangential. We didn't go into detail on all of it, but it is difficult to imagine the scenario where this is not Drew DeVault. So, but otherwise, though, I think that at this point, if we start to see additional people promoting the Stallman report, coming to the defense of Drew DeVault in the absence of Drew DeVault even being willing to defend himself. I think that calls a lot of things into question about the individuals promoting the Stallman report. It calls a lot of things into question, and it'll be interesting to see who does promote the Stallman report knowing all of these facts. It'll be really interesting. It'll be interesting to see who comes to the defense of Drew DeVault when Drew DeVault himself won't even defend himself. It will be interesting to see going forward what additional individuals and groups within open source free software, the computer industry in general, continue to use these same tactics of finding something horrible within themselves and projecting it onto others and attacking others for having that thing which they themselves have in there, blackening their souls. It will be interesting to see if that occurs. I want to end by repeating this one more time. If any of these facts are untrue, I highly urge Drew DeVault to say so, because these are very serious allegations and have significant criminal and legal ramifications for you and for anyone who does business with you going forward. I mean, that this is an extremely serious thing. This is not a whatever, I can dismiss it sort of a deal. I highly urge you to make a statement if these are not true. If they're true, stay silent on it. If they're true, double down on it. Go about it however you want to do it. But maybe get a lawyer. Maybe get a lawyer in the Netherlands. So there you go. There you have it. Hopefully this is the last we hear of this story. Honestly, I don't want to ever have to cover this story again, because I don't want to ever have to say any of the words that were in this piece again. If I could just retire about 10 different words that I've had to say during this show and just never say them again, and they're just banned from the English lexicon, that would be just fine with me. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across the inner tubes, I do declare, end broadcast.